When we think of great naval disasters, the Titanic always comes to mind first. After all, more than 1,500 crew and passengers perished when the ship hit the iceberg and sank in the frozen Atlantic waters. However, today's tale takes us back 52 years before that. Our scene shifts from the Atlantic to the Great Lakes. A civil war was brewing in the United States during a hotly contested presidential campaign between two lawyers from Illinois. The aftermath of this tragedy would be felt over 100 years after it happened. So climb aboard as we set sail on the Lady Elgin through dangerous tides. Elgin was built in 1851 in Buffalo, New York, at a cost of $95,000, which would be $3.95 million in today's money. She was named after the wife of Lord Elgin, Canada's Governor General from 1847 to 1854. During her time, the wooden-hulled side-wheeler was one of the most elegantly appointed passenger ships plying the Great Lakes. Rated a first-class steamer, she was a favorite with the traveling public. Early in her career, she ran between Buffalo and Chicago, then later between Chicago and Collingwood, Ontario. For many of her later seasons, she plied the route between Chicago and the outer Lake Michigan ports and Lake Superior. During Lady Elgin's career, she was involved in numerous accidents. She sank and was repaired in 1854 after striking a rock at Manitowoc, Wisconsin. In 1855, she was towed to Chicago after an accident to her machinery. In 1857, she was damaged by a fire. In June of 1958, she struck a reef at Copper Harbor, Michigan. In August 1858, she was stranded on Osable Point Reef in Lake Superior. In October of 1859, she was lowered to Marquette, Michigan after breaking her crossbeam. In November of 1859, she was towed again when her crank pin broke near Point Iroquois, Michigan. September 6, 1860, would be known as the night of her final journey. Carrying over 400 people on an excursion to Chicago, many of whom were members of Milwaukee's Irish Union Guard, traveling to hear a prominent political speech from Stephen Douglas, who was Abraham Lincoln's opponent in the 1860 presidential election. Although there were no signs he was ever at the event. After a festive spring evening in Chicago, the passengers boarded the Lady Elgin for the return trip to Milwaukee. Spirits were high as the ship set sail into the darkness. But Lake Michigan was restless that night, and a storm was brewing. Around 2:30 a.m., disaster struck. The Lady Elgin collided with the schooner Augusta, which was sailing without proper lights. Concerned she was damaged and believing the Lady Elgin had gotten safely away, Augusta made for Chicago. However, aboard the Lady Elgin, Captain Wilson ordered that the cattle and cargo be thrown overboard to lighten the load and raise the gaping hole in Lady Elgin's port side above water level, while the steward was down in the coal bunker trying to stop the leak with mattresses. Captain Wilson ordered a lifeboat lowered on the starboard side to check the extent of the damage, but it never regained the steamer. Within 20 minutes, the Lady Elgin broke apart, and all but the bow section rapidly sank. The night was lit up at intervals by flashes of lightning showing the scattered wreckage. The life preservers, 2 inches in hardwood planks, 5 foot long and 18 inches, were never used. 2 boats with a total of 18 people reached ashore. In addition, 14 people were saved on a large raft and many others on parts of the wreckage. Over 300 people died and only 98 were saved. The drummer of the German band, Charles Bovering, saved himself by using his large bass drum as a life preserver. Survivors reported the heroic efforts of Captain Wilson to save about 300 people collected on a raft. When day broke, between 350 and 400 passengers and crew were drifting in the stormy waters, holding on to anything they could, many only to be pulled under by breakers near the shore. Students from Northwestern University and Garrett Biblical Institute were watching the shore the morning of September the 8th, looking for survivors. One of the students, Edward Spencer, is credited with rescuing 17 passengers over the course of 6 hours. He sustained injuries during his rescue efforts that left him an invalid for the rest of his life. A plaque in his honor was first placed in the Northwestern University Gymnasium and is now housed in the Northwestern University Library. About 300 people died in the sinking, including Captain Wilson, who was lost trying to save 2 women when he was caught by the surf and forced into the rocks. Most were from Milwaukee, with the majority of those being from the Irish communities, including nearly all of Milwaukee's Irish Union Guard. So many Irish-American political operatives died that day that the disaster has been credited with transferring the balance of political power in Milwaukee. Quote, from the Irish to the Germans. It is said that more than 1,000 children were orphaned by the tragedy. However, the research shows that there are fewer than 40 children orphaned. The Lady Elgin disaster remains the greatest loss of life on open water in the history of the Great Lakes. Following the sinking, Lady Elgin's owner, Gordon Stassenstall Hubbard, received a $12,000 payment from his insurance company, which would total out to be $420,000 in today's money. But neither he nor the insurance company accepted the abandonment of the ship. The captain of the Augusta, Darius Mallott, was arrested and tried in Chicago, but found not guilty of navigational negligence. A coroner's jury declared his second mate, Mr. Budge, to be incompetent and his crew to be of principal blame. However, Professor Mason and Lieutenant Bartlett asserted that a principal cause of the collision was the lack of a $15 lantern on Augusta. Steamboat historian Peter Charlebois noted that after the investigation, Captain Mallott and Lady Elgin's crew and owners were absolved of any blame. He reported that the judgment was based on a law that not only gave sail the right of way over steam, but did not require sailing vessels to carry running lights. Apparently, Augusta had sighted the passenger steamer 20 minutes before the collision, but in the rain had misjudged the distance between them. 4 years after the disaster in 1864, a new ruling was made requiring sailing vessels to carry running lights. Since there were nearly 1,900 ships under sail by 1870, the regulations were long overdue. The wreck of the Lady Elgin was discovered in 1989 off Highwood, Illinois, by Harry Zinch. Zinch was awarded ownership in 1999 after a protracted legal battle. The wreck, consisting of 4 main debris fields lying in 50 and 60 feet of water, has been stripped of the artifacts through the years. Divers must obtain permission from Zetch and Lady Elgin Foundation, are expected to observe the preservation laws governing historic sites. The Underwater Archaeological Society of Chicago undertook a reconnaissance survey of the wreck site in 1992. A Wisconsin historical marker in the historic 3rd Ward of Milwaukee commemorates the tragedy. Calvary Cemetery in Milwaukee has a monument dedicated to the Lady Elgin disaster and the many lost in the tragedy who are buried there. Songwriter Harry Clay Work penned the memorial song Lost on the Lady Elgin in 1861, and for many years in central Canada, this song was sung at family gatherings and social occasions. In 2009, the Milwaukee Irish Heritage and Cultural Center launched a $200,000 fundraising campaign for a mammoth 2-story bronze memorial statue for the Lady Elgin disaster. And that is the tale of the Lady Elgin, one of the first ships to help change maritime regulation in the United States. And as always, we dedicate this podcast to the lives lost and affected by the Lady Elgin disaster. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing. And until next time, may the fair winds guide you through dangerous tides.